We're going to play. I believe this is up. This is where Trump scolding NATO members for not paying their fair share. Um, and you know, I agree with what you're saying, and I think this is a really important point now, particularly for the left, and the degrees of left. I'm probably to the left of you, but I think that the difference between saying that there is a system exemplified by institutions like NATO and the European Union and the World Bank and the IMF that do radically and disproportionately favor Western interests, Western corporations. They've imposed austerity from Latin America and Africa, and now inside the Eurozone, there's a democracy deficit. There's a lot of corruption. NATO was probably
Yep.
quite too aggressive in terms of encroaching on Russian territory after the end of the Cold War. And by the way, we did to Russia in the 1990s what, along with their local criminals and plutocrats, what people like Trump and Ryan want to do here. We looted the public services, we threw tons of people into poverty, and we turned it into a dystopian nightmare. And that's another mark against the Clinton administration. Now, that said, there is a big distinction between saying, do we want to evolve into a better system and use the institutional arrangements that we have that also have worked for some other things, including some development in international law, some environmental frameworks, some sense of mutually assured, security obligations in Europe, which have allowed the modern Europeans to create some very advanced social welfare states and businesses and environmental policies? Or do we just devolve into, return into a purely realpolitik world, which is what
And
people
that's
like
what I'm saying. I mean,
Erdogan,
again,
Putin, and Trump want.
right,
So
that's what you get,
that's what
that's why I'm
yeah,
not saying, you and I don't agree necessarily, don't see everything 100% the
right,
same, but I think we see things mostly the same.
right.
And it's not for me to sit here and say that any of these institutions have been perfect and haven't had plenty of problems. It's that it's still at least the vision of these institutions are that of countries working together to prevent war. And however you view it, whether it's the UN, whether it's NATO or the EU or whatever it is, those types of at least military alliances make it much less likely that there will be war.
And that,
And
yeah. So
that's kind of important.
exactly. And it's the same with trade agreements. Trump campaigned against terrible trade agreements, but he didn't promise to make them better. In fact, the bilateral approach would make them even worse. But let's play Trump calling out the Europeans for supposedly not paying their dues.
2% is the bare minimum for confronting today's very real and very vicious threats. If NATO countries made their full and complete contributions, then NATO would be even stronger than it is today, especially from the threat of terrorism.
What's he talking about there, Cliff?
I'm not sure he knows what he's talking about. I like it, the vicious threats.
Yes.
It reminds me of severe conservatism. I mean, so obviously there's an agreement in place already predating him
Right.
from many of these countries to add more to defense. They've signed it.
Right.
He, of course, doesn't acknowledge that at all. He's completely playing to populism here. And then he has the nerve to obviously bring up terrorism at the end there after what literally just happened in Manchester. Can you imagine if a European leader came to the United States, lectured us on spending too little money on defense, and brought up terrorism right after 9/11? Can you imagine how we'd react to that?
Well, I think we'd be really receptive to the thoughtful criticisms. Well, but it also shows too, though, that again, this notion that like terrorism is not going to be defeated or handled militarily. It's going to be defeated through, mainly intelligence and disruption of networks. So it's also this
That is true
enormously
too,
stupid, kind of assumption. But and you're right. You're looking at this kind of sweep of leaders looking at him, and no matter what moments Fareed Zakaria or Bob Schaefer get excited about his supposed newfound presidentialism, look at his main peers
every week.
Look at their faces. Look at them. Assess this guy, and even if you're, Noam Chomsky, I think you will actually find it just embarrassing.
I mean, there's nothing else you can find it, no matter what your views are. This goes beyond sort of political views. This is whether somebody has the gravitas, the intelligence, just what it takes to be a leader of the country, and he doesn't even come close. I mean, it's not like he's sort of just below the line. One can make an argument that Bush didn't, the last Bush didn't rise to that level either. This guy's so far below that, it's ludicrous. So I mean, and it embarrasses us and it hurts us. In a lot of ways, it will hurt. I mean, you start seeing things like tourism way down, whatever, which hurts our pocketbook.
Foreign investment is down as well.
Yep. There's a lot more to it than that. There's long-term views of this country that he's changing right now.
Right.
But that can harm us in all sorts of ways, some of which we can't even probably think of.
Hey, Sam Seder here. Folks, you probably heard about the whole YouTube advertiser apocalypse. Well, we're suffering from it too. We need your help. If you want to keep this show alive, you want us to be able to still put out clips on a regular basis, head over to our Patreon page. Here's the link right here or down below there. And just give us a couple bucks a month and support this program. Really appreciate it.